I'm here with Bob Chase, and we've been at Kings Lynn Mart taking pictures with showmen, showing showman pictures. Bob, let me pass over to you and you can introduce yourself and your project.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Bob, and I grew up here in Kings Lynn. I was born in 1957, so I was around as a child in the town, and have really fond memories of the mart at that time. It was, it's just always been a feature of the town. So on the children's open days, I remember coming with my school, primary school, to visit the mart, and it was always just an impressive and special kind of occasion, so it stuck with me for a long time. It was much later that I had left Lynn to go to Harrow School of Photography, Harrow School of Art, now Westminster University, to do a 3-year diploma in professional photography. I was there and very interested in photojournalism, which is what my first passion was, using small format cameras to take street photographs, that sort of thing. And so I'd been 3 years, and I was sort of casting about for an idea for my final project at the college in those last years. And I'd had a family connection with showmen, so I was, I had already had a connection into the fairground. And I was fascinated both visually by the fairground and the potential of it. But at that time, I was very interested in the uses of photography for social purposes as well. So there were a few of us at college who were quite politicised, and we were involved in things like the Grunwick strike at that time, and supporting the use of photography, as I say, for social purposes. So I started to do a little bit of research around showmen, some reading and some contacting, and of course soon discovered that there weren't that many photographs, as it were, or the photographs that existed about it, or documentation about it, was very much about the kind of the front end of the show, people coming to the show and the colour of it. But there wasn't much about the life of the showmen themselves, if you like, the background and what it might be like to be a showman, what that life was like. And so this idea was born in my mind to create a project that illuminated this contrast between, if you like, the front end, the public view that people have of the fairground, and contrasting that with the lives of the people who make that happen, who put it together and have done for hundreds of years, actually, in families that have come together. And it struck me as as an important thing to do, which would, if as it were, could give people a bit of insight into the lives of showmen and what they're like, and what their work is like and their business is like. And at the same time as contrasting this with the, as I say, with the public side of it.
So, Bob, we're here at the 2023 Mart, and I'm thinking back at your photographs, which we brought to the Mart this year so that showmen could see. How was it for you being able to show those photographs in Kings Lynn Mart, and for the showmen to see them and see some of their family members, see some images of themselves that they'd never seen?
Yeah, it was really moving, actually. I mean, not something I anticipated was going to happen in this way, because those photographs were taken 45 years ago for a college project, and I spent 6 months, travelling around doing these photographs. And really, they saw the light of day, my college exhibition, sort of in Harrow all those years ago. And at the time, I did try to share them out a little bit more through some of the showman's paper, etc. They weren't unusual at that time, I suspect, and wasn't tremendous amount of interest. So they were confined to a suitcase, which I carried around for 45 years. The pictures in the back of them, inside them. So this whole event, and it came about because really I was wondering what to do with them. I thought they had some value, but they needed to be looked after. If I'd left them in the suitcase, my children may or may not be interested in them or whatever. But I found the archive, and they very kindly took them in. And then, of course, as you know, some months later, as part of your project, you discovered these pictures and thought they had some value. And to cut a long story short, we came up with this idea of bringing them to the Corn Exchange and showing them to the showmen. It just seemed such an obvious thing to do. Not entirely sure how well it would work, but as you know, we put the negatives, because many of which I hadn't seen before, because they'd been digitized by the archive, and we were able to project those on the screen. And I know you did some publicity to bring people in, and the showmen themselves. And I suspect they were a little bit weary of what this was going to be like. But in short order, I think once we had people come in from the Mart, which was on the doorstep, and see these photographs, there was an immediate emotional kind of reaction, both from them to see these photographs, and for people, the whole line of of young showmen, particularly, or showmen pointing out, that's my mum, that's my granny from these photographs, and so it was very heartwarming for me to see that, reaction, to see them valued in that way, not as sort of as aesthetic photographs or bits of artwork, but something that was a document, something that was meaningful for showmen, and they could connect to and want to connect to. So it was quite emotional for me, actually.
Yeah, I think so for me, because with our idea we were like, well, maybe someone might recognise someone in the picture, but we didn't realise how many people would be recognised. And for me, it's really important to put names to people, because you set up Google document so people could access it remotely through QR codes. So now showmen can add details of people they recognise, and then that can go into the archive. Because previously there was photographs, and they were beautiful, and it was someone installing a ride, but they were anonymous. And now, as they kind of get breathed into life with these names and these family histories, they show not only that period of time in the 70s, but the whole generations of showmen that have passed before, and the strong cultural identity of showmen that builds through generations, both through activity, but through the rides and through the attending the Mart every year. And it's those kind of repeated patterns. And I think I really saw that happening between the way showmen were engaging with the photos yesterday. Almost like going through a family album, which I found really, really beautiful. And the feedback from showmen that I went on to interview was, really positive. They were kind of really inspired that their history is being recorded and is important and respected, and contemporary history. And I was talking to Nipper yesterday, and he said, this is what we're doing now, in 50 years will be the past, and we're recording this history for future showmen. So that was really nice to see the continuity in the project. So I was wondering what you think, how you feel, because obviously you gave them to the archive, but has that really kind of instilled your idea of this preservation of their history?
I was driven to something like by, if you like, a political view of it. Here are a group of people in the showmen that are misunderstood, and sometimes there's suspicion from communities, etc., and also confusion about showmen and their particular culture with travellers or with circus or with other groups, but it's very specific, and showmen quite rightly want to be seen and understood as the community that they are, and engaging with and providing value to the community in general. Be it entertainment, but hey, that's really valuable. That's really important, and it's there's continuity of 800 years in this town of Kings Lynn, kind of bringing it along. It had that social dimension to it that I wanted it to be used, and it wasn't at the time, and I guess that was a frustration, because I thought I thought the photographs might be taken up and be used at the time by the showman community. But it didn't happen at that time. So the archive is really important, and it gives me an opportunity to make sure that material is there, and through this project and through the event we did yesterday, to give it back to the showman, if you like. And so through the Google and making and technology is making this possible. That's the extraordinary thing, because all those years ago, 45 years ago, we couldn't distribute, we couldn't collect comments on it in the same way. Now we can make a Google album out of it, and then showmen themselves can share that, and it's kind of giving it back to them in a sense that they can add their own comments. It's not indirectly, and it's not even through you or me into being the intermediaries of it. We're facilitating that ability for them to add to and create part of their own archive and add it onto the photographs that are there. And so I hope it'll be also inspirational for other people, maybe showmen, men and women and kids who want to think about documenting their own families and bringing their own archives. So there was one family that it was Henry Roper who came, and I talked to his daughter. He really wants to give copies, and he wants to have his stories recorded, and he'd love those to go into the archive. So it stimulated other people to start thinking about their memories, their collections, their photographs.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's when there's this kind of tension between history, archival history and personal history. And I know when my dad died, I found all his early photos from the 60s and all his old negatives, and I scanned them in, which again you couldn't have done before independently. You'd have to send them off. So it was like this revelation of seeing these photos that he had made when he was a young man, which I'd never seen, and parts of his life I never knew. And I think that was the same for the younger showmen yesterday, and seeing relatives and seeing uncles as young men, and these pictures of them doing exactly, the same lives that they had been leading. They're living it in a more contemporary way and have some better facilities, but still that kind of repetition, and seeing themselves in these young men who are now older. So I think that was a really beautiful part of the project. As you can hear in the background, the showmen are meeting. This is their meetings that they have at the Mart. So it's nice to hear the Guild, and the Guild are also working to preserve history. And you had engagement with the Guild when you were doing the original project.
Yeah.
And it's nice, Nipper's obviously in the Guild, and it's nice to maintain that relationship through the photographs as well. So as we're speaking, showman identity has been put on the census for the first time since 2021, and that's become a big cultural change, and it's a source of great pride for showmen that they're finally identified and recognised on the census as a distinct identity. So I suppose this project celebrates that, and I think your photographs celebrate that. And you have taken photographs at this Kings Lynn Mart, which we'll be showing as well, and will be added to the archive. So maybe kind of thinking about your work now as a future archiver, maybe you can talk a bit about how it felt taking photographs at this year's 2023 Kings Lynn Mart.
Oh gosh, well, it was fascinating, because I rocked up to meet you, but got here early in the morning, and I was with a suitcase off the train, and but the Mart was setting up just as it was 45 years ago. So I sort of dug my camera out and put my suitcase on the side of a ride, and there were some showmen there, setting up. I've got some copies of the old photographs I took 45 years ago in the suitcase. So I kind of opened it, they were all sort of looking at me quizzically, and I opened up the suitcase and got these photographs out and put them on the top. And I said, would you like to have a look at these? And they came over and started to look at those photographs from 45 years ago. And immediately go, oh yeah, I know who this is. And so it was important for me to not just turn up now as somebody completely unknown or untrusted, to start taking photographs, because it's what they're doing is public, and there are lots of people, I think, taking photographs, and they're probably quite weary or dismissive or ignore people who are doing that. So it seemed important for me to just, at least for a few of them, to signal, look, I've got this bit of a background here, and there's something interesting happening I'm going to share with you, in the sense of almost asking permission. And so I carried a couple of photographs around with me and said, is it okay to take photographs? By the way, hey, look at these from all this time ago. So it was a really extraordinary experience, both having the photographs of 45 years ago and then taking pictures at that point. Of course, the same things happening. They're a different ride and they're a different generation, but there's, different techniques and whatever, but in this same place with 800 years of history. And my photographs now and 45 years ago are a tiny portion of that, but they will go into the archive and they'll be preserved. And so it was, it was emotional for me to kind of, to be back. I was always transported back to that, to when I was a young man, the beginning of my career, taking photographs again. So it was, for me, it was looking back to another self, and there were moments of deja vu of taking photographs and thinking, I remember this is what it felt like, to do this, and being excited visually about it. Because I haven't been a photographer, actually. I've taken photographs, but I haven't been a photographer for 40 years. And it began to, it brought back some of that excitement of seeing somebody, trying to collect that moment of watching what was going on, taking those pictures. So I hope, and again, there are only a handful of those. I've only had only a little opportunity at this point to take some. But even those are quite meaningful for me to again add to the archive along with the old ones that are there.
Well, I think they're really beautiful because it's those echoes, and that, as you say, for you, there's echoes in your life, and photography, there's echoes in the site, and that's a very specific site of Kings Lynn Mart. And I think we were talking yesterday about the echoes of the poses. So even though equipment's changed, that some of the poses in the photograph are the same as the 70s, with that pushing a ride forward or pulling something, and the way men are using their, showmen and women are using their bodies. So I think really interested kind of repetition, repeat, time advances and moves on. And yet there's this beautiful kind of dance of history that moves through the project. It's really beautiful.
It's heavy lifting and all the rest of it, but the tarpaulins and all of that sort of mode. But there's a sort of ballet about it that goes on, And there's I came from a family of engineers and stuff, and so there's this kind of I appreciate some of what's going on. So it's not just this aesthetic. But there's a sort of ballet going on there, and a humour is what I was going to say. That that's there too, of mainly working men, but of course women as well. And I went out of my way to photograph particularly a young woman who was setting a ride up on her own and was using the hydraulics and all of the rest of it. So yes, we know it's predominantly were men working that day, but women are there too and contributing. And if there's something I think is missing from, it's in there a little bit from the photographs I took, and from now it's about the women's involvement, the mums, the daughters, the sisters, and their involvement and support in the community. And that was more difficult to access for me at that time, but and I think that's underrepresented. If I was to do it again or to encourage somebody else, I think there's that whole area that needs illuminating too. It's
more private, I suppose, and that's the ideas of home. Whereas out in the fair and within the fair, that's the more public facing. So I think there's things there, and there's a great efficiency when you look at the space and how intricate and complicated it is to construct a fair safely for the showman and for the people attending, and all these rides. I was there last night, and it was just amazing, all these things moving and not going anywhere near this brilliant kind of construction.
It's
highly
this
skilled.
Is passed down. These skills and the rides and the interest in how they work and all of that engineering skills, it's passed down. I think it's very difficult to come in from the outside and understand it and appreciate it. And a lot of it's not written down, as far as I know. It's not, it's passed down.
Yeah.
It's by example, because from a child you see it and you're involved with it. And that's a real, unspoken skill.
And I'm going to end on one thing really, which is just a bit of information. But Nipper and Lawrence told me that in the olden days, when you took those photographs, they would have to take all the light bulbs out and put them in a little tea chest with newspapers, because when they were moving, all the filaments would get broken. So they'd have to take each single bulb out. And I was looking at all the lights last night, and they don't have to do that. So I really kind of enjoyed working on this project with you, where we've moved from past, I discovered you in the archive in the past, and bringing that full circle to the future and to contemporary show life. So I'd like to really thank you for A, making the photographs in the first place, and B, being so generous with your time and coming back to Lynn with me. It's been wonderful to have your pleasure. Insights as well as a local Linnian.
What we are. Yeah. No, it's been a pleasure, and I'm just so grateful to the archive and to you for these photographs to be brought back to the light and shared with showmen. I mean, what greater compliment could there be?